Before looking at the Battle of Cannae, let's briefly review the Spanish front. Around September 218 BCE, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio, the brother of the consul Cornelius Scipio, received most of the troops at the Rhone River and headed to Spain. At the time, Gnaeus was serving as a quaestor, and he arrived in Spain around the fall of the same year. He landed in the Greek colonial city of Emporion, an ally of Rome, and secured a foothold.
We come in peace,
Afterwards,
seeking an accord
he
for the
succeeded in
prosperity of
bringing
both our
several
peoples.
Spanish
Your words
tribes
are
north of
smooth,
the Ebro
Roman,
River
but trust
who were resisting Carthage over to the Roman side. He also fought a battle at Sissa, capturing the Carthaginian general Hanno in a significant victory. Through this, he established Roman control over the region north of the Ebro. This success gave the Roman Senate hope for the Spanish front.
Consequently, in 217 BCE, Cornelius Scipio was appointed proconsul and sent to Spain. Around the summer of 217 BCE, he arrived in Spain with approximately 10,000 troops and joined his brother Gnaeus to jointly command the Roman forces. While Gnaeus had already secured the region north of the Ebro, after Cornelius's arrival, the two brothers expanded their operations south of the river.
Secure the eastern territory.
With the cooperation of the local noble Abalix near Saguntum, they successfully liberated Spanish prisoners held by Carthage.
You are free now.
This was considered a major diplomatic achievement and played a significant role in encouraging surrounding Spanish tribes to support Rome. As a result, by the end of 217 BCE, the Scipio brothers had conducted successful military operations on the Spanish front. Thanks to their efforts, Carthage's reinforcements and supply lines were effectively cut off, even while Hannibal was achieving successive victories in Italy.
Finally, the year 216 BC has dawned, bringing with it the fateful Battle of Cannae. Rome had suffered repeated defeats at the hands of Hannibal, but the delaying tactics of former dictator Fabius allowed the Romans to gradually prepare a counteroffensive. However, it had become increasingly difficult for Rome to continue following Fabius's strategy. While Hannibal was raiding and devastating allied cities, the Roman army could only watch helplessly, and the Roman citizens, especially those in allied cities, were extremely discontent. So far, the allied cities had remained loyal, but if this situation continued, some might eventually defect. Consequently, public opinion largely favored confronting Hannibal directly to end the war.
The Roman Senate began preparing for a full-scale war. Previously, Rome typically mustered 4 legions, a total of 40,000 soldiers, for military campaigns. This time, however, they combined existing forces to raise a total of 8 legions, around 87,000 troops. In modern terms, the Roman Senate was all in on capturing Hannibal. Before the campaign, Fabius advised the consul from the aristocracy, Aemilius Paulus, to continue adhering to his strategy. Paulus agreed to follow the advice, but worried about how he could restrain the other consul, Gaius Terentius Varro, who insisted on a decisive battle.
However, the prevailing trend at the time favored full-scale battle. The Senate was mobilizing twice as many troops specifically to crush Hannibal in open combat. In other words, this was not the moment for Paulus to dwell on delaying tactics. Keeping this in mind is essential for understanding the Battle of Cannae, especially since the battle is often presented differently from the actual circumstances.
Meanwhile, the plebeian consul, Varro, openly criticized Fabius's cautious strategy from the start. He argued that such tactics were draining Rome's vitality, and boldly proclaimed that he would strike Hannibal decisively to end the war in a single blow. Naturally, the Roman citizens enthusiastically supported him, and praised his confidence.
Hannibal faced a crisis while wintering at Geronium. His army was running dangerously low on food due to Rome's delaying and attritional strategies. Rome had stockpiled grain in fortified cities, limiting Hannibal's ability to forage. The Carthaginian soldiers began to complain about hunger, and public grievances about unpaid wages and food shortages grew louder. Rumors spread that Spanish mercenaries were considering defecting to the Romans. Some even whispered that Hannibal might leave a portion of his infantry behind while retreating to Gaul with the cavalry. Hannibal was under immense pressure.
The previous consuls, Gnaeus Cornelius and Marcus Atilius Regulus, continued to command the army as proconsuls even after their official terms ended on March 14, 216 BCE. Normally, new consuls would take over after the end of a term. However, the situation was exceptional because Rome was preparing an unprecedented 8 legions. They also needed to coordinate with allied city troops and secure supplies and provisions for such a large force, which required considerable time. Consequently, the Senate appointed the 2 former consuls as proconsuls to continue confronting Hannibal's forces. The proconsuls were ordered by the Senate to avoid full-scale engagement with Hannibal. Additionally, Servilius was responsible for training newly recruited soldiers. The Senate instructed that small-scale skirmishes with Hannibal's forces should continue as a form of practical training to give the recruits combat experience.
Hannibal responded brilliantly to the crisis. While holed up at Geronium, he timed his movement with the wheat and barley harvest in June. Rather than moving toward Campania, he advanced to Cannae in Apulia, east of Campania. With a slightly accelerated march, it was possible to reach Cannae from Geronium within a week. At that time, Cannae was a crucial Roman supply base. Losing it would threaten the food production of surrounding Allied territories. Polybius recorded that the capture of Cannae caused great confusion among the Roman forces. Although this did not solve Hannibal's long-term logistical problems, it provided a short-term solution to the food shortage. At that very moment, the situation for Rome and Carthage reversed. Rome was now assembling an army of over 80,000 troops. With the Cannae supply base lost, feeding such a massive force from the south became a daunting challenge.
So why did Rome neglect such a crucial point? The answer lies in the rigidity and inefficiency of the political system at the time. The 2 proconsuls, Servilius and Regulus, faithfully followed the Senate's orders to pursue the enemy, but avoid full-scale engagement. They had no independent command authority. Every time they needed to decide on a course of action, they had to send letters back to Rome requesting instructions. They even submitted reports stating that approaching the enemy too closely will inevitably lead to battle.
When Hannibal left Geronium and seized Cannae, the 2 proconsuls immediately realized it and promptly reported back to Rome. In other words, they were thoroughly carrying out their assigned duties while shadowing Hannibal. It's possible that Hannibal was fully aware of these systemic limitations of Rome. Meanwhile, the Roman leadership was putting all its efforts into ending the war at once through direct confrontation with Hannibal. They may have believed that deploying overwhelming forces wherever Hannibal appeared would resolve everything. As a result, they seem to have paid insufficient attention to finer strategic considerations or the surrounding circumstances.
Hannibal, however, accurately assessed the weaknesses of the Roman army and cut off their supply lines. He anticipated that Rome would respond immediately. Moreover, he knew that the plains of Cannae offered an ideal battlefield for his cavalry, his main striking force. Hannibal counted on the Romans rushing onto the battlefield, aiming to decide the conflict in a single engagement. By this point, it was the Romans, not Hannibal, who were acting under pressure. Ultimately, the Battle of Cannae was not a fight Hannibal was forced into out of desperation. Rather, it was the result of the Roman army, would be plagued by food shortages, being forced into a situation where they could no longer avoid battle. Of course, since both Hannibal and Rome were aiming for open battle, the confrontation inevitably escalated into a massive engagement.
We must act
The Roman
now.
Senate, realizing the
Send
urgency,
riders to
acted
every
quickly. By late June, the newly elected consuls hurriedly led the assembled troops out of Rome. Around July 18, they arrived near Cannae and joined the two proconsuls. At this point, former consul Regulus returned to Rome, while Servilius remained as proconsul to command a single division. Under the new consul's leadership, the Roman army established camp along the Aufidus River around July 20, leaving just over 10 days before the Battle of Cannae.
Ancient historians consistently placed the primary blame for the defeat at Cannae on Varro,
Rome
who had
stands at a
command on the
precipice.
day of the
We
battle.
must choose greatness.
However, a closer look suggests that the historical accounts may have been somewhat manipulated. We'll stop here for now, and in the next installment, we'll dissect the Battle of Cannae in detail. Thank you for watching.